Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Of course, if you have been listening to the show for the last few weeks, you know our good pal Justin Kuzart is remaining on paternity leave. I got to be honest, he's going to be, I think he might be back a little sooner than I expected. I don't want to give anything away, but maybe next episode, stay tuned for that. And that's coming from him. I'm not, obviously, he's got a brand new child. I'm not willing him back at all like that. I told him take his time, but, you know, he's got the itch. Can't really blame him there. It is a fun time in the NBA. And joining me in Justin's place this week, we got my friend Ryan Mayer. Follow him at R Mayer _Mayer, excuse me, Mayer. Let me just say that one more time when I don't completely butcher it there for you. I mean, you've been on the show before, but it's at R Mayer, R_Mayer from The Athletic. Of course, you have heard him on here before. If you're watching us on the YouTube, I swear that this wasn't planned and that we entirely didn't twin tonight. I know we lived together in college at one point, but like, this is super adorable, bro. I mean, look at us on the same wavelength.
I mean, you know, that's what happens when we live together in college and then we're at a wedding a couple weekends ago together. You know, this is the kind of thing that happens. Just same brain.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we've already commiserated about the Sixers. We're not going to warm up with that. We
no, please.
I promise. You know, Ryan is a Sixers fan, but I promise we're not going to overwhelm you with that. You know, people are finally like, man, he gets a break. You know, Justin's not here. We finally maybe get a break. We'll see. But no, in all seriousness, obviously, we have a lot to talk about in this episode. Most notably and importantly, the Denver Nuggets are NBA champions for the first time in franchise history. So, of course, right off rip, congrats to the Nuggets. We're going to break down everything from the finals, games 3 through 5, what we liked, how Denver did it, what they're going to do going forward. Of course, talk about Miami as well. You know, quite an unfortunate ending for them, but at the same time, I mean, what an absolutely wild ride that they went on. I don't think that this is something they should be hanging their heads too much about, especially given the quality of the competition they beat to get here. And a little bit coming out of Toronto too. Toronto's got a new coach. We talked a little bit about the coaching carousel last week, and a little bit of roster news as well, with Fred VanVleet officially declining his option. So we'll get into that a little bit later. In the meantime, though, of course, you can listen to the show anywhere you find a podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them on the podcast if you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, TuneIn. Again, anywhere you find a podcast, you can find us. And watch the show on YouTube. Again, you know, you can see us twinning. I swear. It's like a, what is this, shade of blue? I guess it's like a teal almost.
Like lightish blue kind of color. Yeah, I don't know.
It's not full sea green. Like, I didn't want to go that far.
No, yeah, it's not that far down the path. It's also not like the Carolina blue. Like, it's somewhere in between. I don't know.
It's going in that direction though. But either way, you can watch us on YouTube. Just follow us at the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so I don't want to brag, but I nailed it. Denver in 5. I'm just going to get that out of the way. I put it on Twitter. My predictions have been pretty bad for the most part overall. We're not going to talk about my first round. It wasn't great. But no, in all seriousness, congratulations again to the Denver Nuggets. Winning of game 5, 94-89, wrapping up the series in 5 games over the Heat. Again, first championship in franchise history, undefeated in the finals. I'm sure every Denver fan is going to make that joke for a while. What's this, 47 years in the NBA now since making the switch over from the ABA? And fun fact for the history nerds, they are the 3rd ABA team to win a title, behind San Antonio, of course, who has 5 of them at this point, and the Supersonics. How about Seattle winning back in the 70s? One of the early ones after that.
We miss you, Seattle. It's okay.
Yeah, and listen, I fully know this podcast is 10 seasons in. I imagine if we get to season, I'm calling if we get to season 15, at that point, I think they're already in Seattle. Like, I could imagine within the next year or two. To me, the only other question is where does the other franchise go? You know, does it go in Vegas like it seems like every sport in the world is doing right now, though that seems to be working, honestly. Can't really argue with that. I mean, the Golden Knights, as we're recording this on a Tuesday, the Golden Knights could be Stanley Cup champions by the end of that, or by the end of the night, I should say. But yeah, that's certainly an option. I mean, I know Mexico City is always the other option if you really want to get unique with it. Louisville is always floated. Kansas City's floated. I got to be honest, it seems like it's trending Vegas. I don't know if they move a couple of the Western teams back east. it's somebody like Memphis, for example. Maybe you push more to the Eastern Conference. That kind of makes sense geographically because I mean, obviously, it's not going to be Vegas or Seattle. That would be absolutely insane. But no, we're here to talk about Denver. We don't need to get too far off track. Nikola Jokic, Finals MVP. It's so many different angles, but I think that, of course, is the big takeaway is just the anointment of Nikola Jokic now at 28 years old, a two-time MVP, now a Finals MVP with ring number one. Certainly a lot of career left to go. And it was. I mean, he was just so unstoppable in this series. I mean, the stat that everybody is rightfully talking about, the first player to lead the entire playoffs in points, rebounds, and assists for a campaign. And every game from Jokic just felt like it did for the Nuggets this playoff run. And like the adjective I've been using for their wins this entire run for me has been textbook. They've just come out and they handled their business. And that's exactly what it felt like this was. Like I said before the series, we knew the talent level was way higher in Denver. It was going to take a lot going right pretty much everything going right for Miami. And you got to give Denver credit. They didn't slip. They didn't let the fact that they were the clear favorites get in their heads and maybe play down a little bit. It was a textbook Finals victory for them. They just went out and handled it.
Yeah, there's no question. And textbook's a great word for it. I think another one is kind of inevitable in a sense as well. And Marcus Thompson actually wrote a little bit about this in his column after the game last night, and just in the way that Jokic responded to the win. Right, like usually we're used to seeing players crying as the seconds tick down because it's the realization of their dream. We saw that emotion coming from various different players on the court, and Jamal Murray, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, as he dribbled out the clock. Jokic just walked right over to the Miami bench, started shaking hands with Erik Spoelstra, with the entire team. He's dapping up Haywood Highsmith. Like that's a level of just, yeah, man, I'm here punching the clock. We got this win. All right, time to go home. Like
it's incredible.
And it's crazy. It's absolutely insane because it's not a matter of effort in any way, shape, or form. I feel like a lot of times when you're talking about that with a player where it feels like they're punching in, punching out, you're almost questioning their work ethic or effort in a way. It's not that with Jokic. You can see the effort, you can see the work ethic that he's put in just over the time in the league. It's more just, hey man, like this is every day for me. This is what I do. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to get this triple double and I'm going to go home. And that's pretty much how this goes. So yeah, just an incredible Finals performance from him. And you know what? I mean, credit to the entire front office there in Denver for what they've built with this team, right? Because the pieces around Jokic are perfectly complementary to the style of basketball that he plays and the style of basketball that Michael Malone wants them to play defensively as well.
Well, and you're right. I want to get into the front office and the coaching here in a second. I want to go back to Jokic in a sec because I think the one thing you said is really important because like you and I joked before this, it's like, right, Jokic is going to be the best NBA player to ever just punch the clock. It feels like he's the guy that if you have to stay 15 minutes late for work, he's going to bill you for it. And like, you're going to hear
about 100%.
But I don't want that to undersell. You're right. I don't want that to undersell the fact that like, right, he's not lazy. He clearly has put the work in. Like he's dominated this sport for the past year. I mean, really the past couple here now. Clearly it shows. I mean, like we said, a level of domination that we haven't seen before, but it's just incredible. I mean, I love the exchange afterwards and the one that everybody's talking about in the post-game press conference. This dude is furious that their parade is on Thursday. All he wants to do is go home to Serbia and hang out with his brother and hang out with his horses and just chill with his family. And look, I completely get it because I do think there's this, like, some people live and breathe and die. Like LeBron, for example, we know that dude just digests basketball 24/7. If he's not at home or if he's not playing or doing something in the NBA, he's watching his kids hoop. He's shooting free throws and posting routines on his garage. Like that dude just like Jokic just isn't like that, but there's nothing wrong with that. Like especially when the body of work that you're putting up is so impressive. Like, look, he's clearly giving it 250% when he's on the clock. So you can't really complain about it.
No, not at all. One of the other things that stood out to me too about the post-game press conference was even just, and it's exactly what you're talking about him being furious about the parade being on Thursday. It's just like, I just might ask for a couple more weeks off from the coach. And it was supposed to be a joke. No one in the room laughed. They thought he was serious. And then he was just like, yeah, that was supposed to be a joke. Good job, guys. And it's just like, it's that kind of thing where you're just like, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, you could
Yeah.
just want to go home.
The
But
only way you know
that's
that one is
exactly what we expect.
the only way you know that one is because or maybe you'd have a clue is because there's that awesome the video of him and his brother just throwing Mike Malone into the air after they won the title, like giving him the full, what they do that over in Japan when they win the championship. How they just toss their manager in the air as a team. That's exactly what they were giving him last night. And that's, there's so many different, again, things I don't know where to talk about because you're right. It's the role players, it's the front office, it's the coaching. I mean, the narrative around this team for the past 2 years has been, man, they're really good. If only they had their guys, they could maybe make a run at this. And here we go, first year. You get Michael Porter Jr. We know he struggled in the finals, but you don't get here without him. You get a full year of him consistency wise. Jamal Murray, it just all came down to timing. Like, I feel like Jamal Murray got this rep that he was injury prone when it was just like, no, he got hurt at the worst time of the year in the bubble, and it just cost him 2 playoff runs. Like, that was, I mean, last year he maybe could have pushed it if they got back to the finals, but even that would have been a reach. Like, and if anything, I feel like you have to go, hey, that was a pretty wise decision to keep him out. I mean, this is a guy who really stepped up. I mean, averaged 20 and 10 in the finals. And really with Jamal Murray too, it was when Jokic he just was the guy when they needed him to be. Like, I really thought, especially in game 3, because when I look at this series, game 3 to me is the important one, right? Because I thought, going back 1-1, Miami kind of stealed. They're the first team to beat Denver in this postseason. They're on their home floor. They get off to a really great start in that game. And you start to wonder, is Miami going to do this like they did to every other team where kind of that doubt starts to creep in? I really thought early in that game, Jamal Murray not only just kept them afloat, but just allowed them to stay in it. And especially in that game, I mean, because you had to have Jamal Murray and Jokic both go well over 30 points for that game. And it felt like nobody had anything else going. Christian Brown, I think, was the only other one in double digits. Like, Aaron Gordon struggled, KCP struggled, Bruce Brown struggled. And so on one hand, you got to feel good about Denver coming back after that, because you're just like, hey, if we get anything, we're going to roll. Like, we basically played our worst game possible, and Miami was excellent, and we still found a way to win. Game 4, they just go in and blow the doors off them, and that's when, like you said, it did. It certainly felt inevitable after game 4. Obviously a pretty ugly game in game 5. I mean, an 89-94 final score. Just, I mean, both
taking us back to late 90s, early 2000s basketball there.
Super gross. I mean, Denver was in foul trouble a lot of the time, but I mean, to that point, again, that's Denver's championship DNA with this team, right? Like, the fact that, I mean, Aaron Gordon, it felt like, had 3 fouls, I think 9 minutes into the second, or with 9 left in the second quarter, he had picked up 3 fouls. Jokic had 2 early. And again, they just found a way late. It was just other guys. Porter Jr. finally came through for them in a game 5, especially on the boards. I thought he did a great job. Aaron Gordon, what a series for him. The comparison I use for Aaron Gordon, and again, I swear I'm not trying to make this a Philly thing, but it reminds me of the way that he's broken out on this team and how his skill set is finally being recognized. Because I think Aaron Gordon was always good in Orlando. He was just miscast, right? Like, he was kind of cast to be this number 1 guy, but he always did a lot of things well. It reminds me of how Andre Iguodala was in Philly, right? Where he just came behind Iverson, did a lot of great things. He just wasn't really a number 1 guy. But when you put him on a great championship team, when he doesn't have to be the number 1 guy, and you can just allow him to excel at the things he's good at, I mean, it really worked. Like, the fact that, his cutting game, and the fact that he was able to use his size just to get into the lane the way he could. And especially defensively. I mean, I'm not a huge plus minus guy, but by far the highest plus minus in the series. And on Jimmy Butler, just taking the toughest assignment, really did a good job on him defensively. I mean, they tried to give Miami credit. They tried to kind of switch it so that they get Murray on him a little bit more, but really a great series for him. I'm happy for him as well that he's going to get known a little more for something now than other than getting robbed in dunk contests, because that's like Aaron Gordon's main thing.
Yeah, that's been his career up to this point. Yeah,
but
the thing that stands out to me, and you mentioned it a little bit there, is the defensive side of things, right? Because this is a team that we put so much focus on the beauty with which Jokic plays, some of the passes that he drops off that you're just wondering how he sees, but they've built this around, like, really keeping their presence defensively, right? Outside of Jokic and Murray, allowing those two to do what they need to do offensively and not shoulder as heavy of a load defensively. It's not to say that either of them are bad defensively. In fact, Jokic has improved a lot on that side of the ball. But with Porter Jr. and Gordon and Bruce Brown, and then you're throwing some of the other guys they have off the bench, like a Braun in there as well, they have so much length. And that's what really stood out to me against this Miami team that is kind of it was almost kind of a like clash of two eras in that respect, right? Like Miami is very much that small ball kind of team. Bam is more of a power forward than a center. He's a little bit like lankier, a little bit slimmer down low, not the prototypical like post player from years past in the way that Jokic really fills out that body type. They have a bunch of guards around them that can fly off of screen, shoot well, and Denver just, from a size standpoint, locked them down. And you could see it in stretches coming out of each of the last three games into the second half, right? In game 3, it was a quick 6-0 spurt from the Nuggets. They held Miami scoreless for the first like 3 minutes of the third quarter. Same thing going into game 4. It was 4.5 minutes in which Miami scored just 4 points. The Nuggets built up a 10-point lead. And then in game 5, obviously Miami goes into halftime with the lead, but coming out of that, within 6 minutes into the third quarter, Denver's on a 16-9 run and it's tied at 60. And those are the types of things that it just felt like they just smothered Miami out of anything that they were trying to get offensively. And a large part of that is due to the length and to your point exactly, putting these players in positions to succeed, like a Gordon, like a Bruce Brown, where they're not asked to do too much offensively just because of the star power that Murray and Jokic provide and the gravity with which they pull guys to them on the offensive end.
Well, and like you said, it's intelligent roster construction, right? It's like
Yep.
you've got your two guys. You've got a great guard in Jamal Murray. You've got clearly your elite franchise superstar Nikola Jokic, who of course is unique, and we know that's how he runs an offense out of that center position. Like it breaks even the best coaching. I mean, look at Eric Spoelstra threw everything he could at him. It didn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was just the story of the playoffs. Is it just didn't matter. Sometimes good offense wins. But you're right. They invested heavily in wings and they invested heavily in guys that can shoot the basketball. That's how you win in the modern NBA. Like you need guys that can defend and you need guys that can shoot. Denver went big on both of them. Going out and their offseason moves or some of the more shrewd in-season ones like Bruce Brown. That was a low-key, super low-key pickup from Brooklyn, and look at the impact he made. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that's another guy with championship DNA, being a part of that team with the Lakers in 2020. Like They just made good signings all around. Credit their front office and credit them for taking the risk to where they needed to. Michael Porter Jr. is exactly the type of risk that someone with a franchise, and we said this at the time, like Michael Porter Jr. was a top 3 pick if he didn't deal with any injury issues.
If he had no injury history, he was easily like top 5 in that draft, if not, to your point, top 3.
And that's exactly, and with Denver, that's the swing you take that gets you to a championship. And it's tough because with a 15 pick, when you're trying to fill out those gaps and you have your guys and you really need to make those around the edges moves, like you want to try to get everybody, maybe you try to go safer, but those are the swings that win some time. And obviously, like they've had Porter now for 4 years. Like this has clearly been, all struggles aside, like again, they don't get here without him. It's pretty safe to say that was an overwhelming success of a pick. You just got to give them credit and credit for sticking with Mike Malone. Mike Malone's a guy, he's been a good coach a long time. I always go back to his tenure in Sacramento. I thought he was phenomenal there. I thought Denver, I know he's a little intense at times and maybe that rubs some people the wrong way, but I think in terms of winning, the proof is in the pudding at this point. And again, that's kind of with consistency. I think that has mattered here with these guys. Murray's a homegrown talent. He's been there a long time. Jokic has obviously been there a long time, but Mike Malone's been there a long time too. He's the fourth longest tenured head coach in the NBA right now. That's not bad when 2 guys ahead of you are Greg Popovich and Eric Spoelstra, who are both Hall of Famers. Like they got a good one and they haven't tried to overthink it. They let him do his thing.
Yeah, consistency is one word for it. Patience, I think, is another big key word with this franchise, right? Because even if you look back to the decisions that could have been made there with Jamal Murray in that 2017-2018 range, right? Like they probably had offers on the table to get Murray out of Denver to try and bring in a star to put alongside Jokic at that point in time, right? Instead, they let him develop over the course of those years. And yeah, okay, he was injured over the course of the past couple of seasons, and that kept them from getting to the title run. But it was that patience that they showed in the beginning, allowing these young guys to develop together and then building the core around them that has led them to this point. And now they're at a point where, I mean, you look to the future and who's leaving? I mean, Bruce Brown probably, right? Because he played himself into a new contract. He's not, I assume he's not going to take the player option for next season, right? Like it's,
No,
I don't know,
not that one.
6.8 million or something like that. He definitely played himself into a bigger contract than that with the way that he played for this team. But outside of that, the rest of like the other top 8 guys for this squad are all back next season. So you're really just talking about filling in around those guys, and they've set themselves up really well just by showing that patience. It's kind of just insane how well they've built this franchise right now.
We should have known Denver was on a different type of time, and I said this because they made the trade during the finals to get another first rounder. They said, "Hey, by the way,
I was about to bring that up too.
Like,
yeah.
we're gonna play to win this final, and oh, by the way, we care about maximizing this window, so we're gonna go trade with OKC and get one of their 19 gazillion picks that they have." But
and a couple of second rounders too, and we've seen what they can do with them.
Yeah, it's see Nikola Jokic now, the lowest drafted Finals MVP ever. I know it's become cliche at this point, but this man got drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. Like, it's crazy. I mean, I go flashback to 2016 and 2017. Like, we had real debates on this podcast of whether it was Jokic or Nurkic, and like they drafted them in the same draft. Like, that was a real decision for them. Obviously, they picked right. And that's the thing. Like, this team is set to be good now for a long time. You talked about the patience, even with Jamal Murray recently, like not giving up on him during those injuries, because I mean, people could have panicked and got low and just said, you know what, we got to go now. It's like, no, we trust in you to get right. We know what we saw in the bubble. The last time this team was healthy, we were pretty close to winning a title, and you got to give them credit for, like you said, that patience definitely paid off.
And even the patience just to like hold him back from coming back for the playoffs last year. You know what I mean? Like, because they could have, a lot of franchises would have rushed him back to try and get that chemistry back on the floor. To their credit, they looked at it and said, we're playing a longer term game here. Now he's healthy, and we see the result.
Yeah, it certainly paid dividends. And there's a lot to like. I mean, like you said, they're set up really well going forward. It's hard to win multiple titles in the NBA. Nothing is given, especially in the Western Conference. We have no idea how free agency is going to shake up. But I mean, look, Jokic is 28 years old. Like, the window is wide open. You've got one now. And even just having that experience, we've seen how long and how much dividends that can pay going forward in these playoff runs. Like, again, a lot of basketball to play next year, but maybe this run shouldn't have been a surprise. Like, Denver was the best team all year. Like, the biggest thing was, can they do it in the playoffs? Their guys got healthy. They did it. Like, there shouldn't be any more doubts now. And more importantly, for all the bozos who are talking about TV ratings, which is super weird because the NBA fans are the only sport where we do this where we care about TV ratings. We the highest rated finals in 5 years overall for the playoffs. Like, the market was there. Like, good basketball will always just rise to the top, and that's what I feel like this was. Like, this was a hoop series. Like, we know Denver was a little bit ahead of Miami in terms of talent, and that is unfortunate because I feel like the playoffs were great overall. And we're spoiled. We want the 6 and the 7 game finals, right? Like, everybody wants that classic.
But you got some of the classic series leading up to the finals, right? Like, that Miami Boston series was a classic. Like, there's no way around it. You get a team coming back from down 3-0 to force a game 7. And the game 7 was nuts. So, like, you got those classics along the way to the finals, and then you just got the ability to really appreciate what this Denver team is. It took a insane shooting performance for Miami in game 2, like 48% clip from 3 in order to beat this team. So, like, take a look at the dominance of this run, 16-4 in the playoffs. And Zach Lowe had a column earlier today on ESPN, Kevin. I had to pull out the stat that he had in there. So they beat opponents in this postseason by 8 points per 100 possessions. Since 96, 97, only 9 other teams have won the title with a bigger per possession scoring margin. The Warriors in 2015, 2017, 2018, the Cavs in 99, or excuse me, the 2016 Cavs, the Spurs in 99 and 2014, the Lakers in 2001 and 2009, and the Bulls in 98. That's incredible company for this team to be in.
Yeah, they're all dynasties. And I mean, even the
Like-
Cavs, like the Cavs should have been. I mean, if the Warriors don't have Durant, the Cavs probably look a lot better. Like, you know what I mean? They probably have more than one of them, at least I could say. Every one of those other have multiple. And that's the thing. Like Jamal Murray's still young and in his prime too. Porter, you could argue, hasn't even hit his prime yet. So to that token, like you said, they're going to lose Bruce Brown for sure. Like you said, he's definitely played himself into money. But they were running a 7-8 man rotation essentially. I mean, it wasn't because of foul. I can't believe we got DeAndre Jordan minutes. That's crazy. And in a way, that's kind of dope. Because, like,
we did get DeAndre Jordan minutes, and good for him, man. Because
because the last time I saw him play real meaningful basketball, he was maybe the worst player in the NBA. But he got this last contract, and you know what? He's going out with a ring. Good for you, DeAndre Jordan.
Those are always the guys that, like, this time of year, especially, I think we can all kind of root for a little bit, right? Like, they were the entertaining guys when they had their era. The DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul era Clippers were so much fun, and they just never got over that peak. And now you get to see him get out there and win a title with this team. Obviously, he's not at the level that he once was,
but at least he played something. Like, he wasn't just bench right. Like we always see this at this time of year, and you always look at the guys who sometimes get late and they get the rings, and obviously you're because DeAndre Jordan's had a great NBA career. Like, he's not a Hall of Famer or anything, but he's definitely had a really solid NBA career. Like 10 plus years. I think he's closer to 15 at this point. But yeah, so that's great where he goes out with a ring, but it's even better when they're actually a part of the rotation, but they kind of sneak one late. And the example that I'm talking about here with Denver is Jeff Green. How about Uncle Jeff Green going out and getting a ring, like finishing his career on a high note? Like, this is a guy who's been on so many different NBA rosters throughout his career, so many different franchises, to go out and play. And, he was part of this rotation. Like, again, he's not starting or anything like that, but he's playing meaningful minutes. The equivalent on the Heat would have been Kyle Lowry and Kevin Love, who both have rings already, so it's a little different for them. But, kind of in that more complimentary role, but still playing meaningful minutes. They're not just, sitting on the bench and only getting in when it's a 30-point blowout in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, on the Miami front too, like I think, because obviously we have to give Denver their flowers for everything that they did over the course of this championship run, and rightfully so. But man, this Miami run was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Just from all the way through this playoffs, this team has just been an absolute joy to just sit back and watch, because you always knew that come the fourth quarter, if they're within range, it's entirely possible they're going to go out and just get that win by any means necessary. Half the time it was Jimmy Butler on the way. And did that play a part in them looking pretty gassed towards the tail end of this finals? Yeah, probably, because they ended up spending a lot of energy trying to get here, even though they didn't play that many more games than the Nuggets. It felt like there were more high intensity minutes for Miami throughout the playoff run than there were potentially for Denver in that stretch. And I just have to give kudos to that Miami team, because it doesn't seem to matter who's on the roster. They just always find some kind of way to put themselves in situations to win. And this is even without Tyler Hero throughout much of the tail end of this run. So they're going to be interesting to watch next season and going into the future as well.
It was the ultimate zombie run. Like, there's no way around it. And certainly for Spo and Jimmy, who are both already certified, I think in everybody's eyes. I mean, Spo's a multi-champion Hall of Famer. Jimmy should have been after the bubble run in terms of being solidified in everybody's eyes. But now when you go here in the second time and you do it again, and again, they didn't just beat slack teams to get here. When you take out Boston, when you take out Milwaukee, it's just an absurd run. and just taking out the Knicks, I had them favored against the Knicks. I guess that's the
All
only
right,
one that
sure.
series is
But
a little different, but like whatever. You beat who you play in front of you. It is. It was an incredible run. I think to the point where they ran out of gas too, and maybe that's the theme of their season is that they were constantly playing clutch time minutes in the regular season
yep.
because they were in all these close games and they were always near that 500 mark. They won a lot, they lost a lot, and that's why it was so crazy, right? Like we've beaten the drum a zillion times. They're 27th in offensive rating. They were 3 minutes away from losing to Chicago. Like we know what it is. I don't know. Like Miami, of course, anytime you get that close to winning a title, you feel disappointed about it for sure when you lose. But I don't know. This is not a run that I'm too disappointed about. If I'm a Miami fan, like if anything, I'm just proud of my guys. Like they fought all the way to the end. Of course, you wish you had a little more. They just didn't have the firepower. Like that's the thing is, I feel like with Miami, I don't even feel like they played that poorly. Like they had a couple bad
No.
shooting nights, but I thought for the most part, the things they need to go right, like Bam Adebayo had an awesome series. Like I talked about him being the X factor before. I thought he was good defensively. I thought he looked a lot more assertive with the ball in his hands. Like he certainly had a good one. All their bench players for the most part, like they kind of rotated between good and bad games, but like, you got contributions out of Caleb Barton, out of Gabe Vincent, out of Max Strus, except for that one game where he went 0 for 10. That was wild. But no, I mean, they didn't have enough high-end guys at the end of the day. Like a part of them, of course, was missing Hero. I think Hero would have helped a lot. I don't think it would have been enough, but it's a different story if you got prime Kevin Love and prime Kyle Lowry, but they just had reached their peak. It's frankly, like we said, it feels like a miracle that they got there. And that's why I'm only saluting them. Like I have nothing bad to say about this Miami team. They proved to everyone that they're just dogs. You would go to battle with anybody in that locker room. They're extremely well coached. Like, again, it's just another notch in Spo's Hall of Fame resume, like one of his most impressive jobs ever, in my opinion. I'm not as bullish about Miami's future. I think they have some tough decisions. They're in a weird spot right now because they're expensive and I don't know how they get better. Like, I think at the same time, even if you have Hero back and this roster is maximized to its full capacity, I still don't think they're getting past Denver. And I still think they would have probably been the underdog in that Milwaukee and Boston series. I don't like, there's just a lot of expensive guys on that roster between Lowry, who's taking a lot of space. Duncan Robinson's contract is obviously taking a lot of space. And of course, some of the guys have also played themselves into new contracts as well. How much money is Gabe Vincent going to get this offseason?
Yep.
There's always somebody from Miami. And that's the beauty of Heat culture, right? Is they're always good at finding these gems. They develop them, but then they go and get paid. They just can't afford them to a point. Like, I have no doubt that Miami will come out and just unearth some dude that we've never heard of. You and I will look back at this podcast and we'll just laugh because we'll be like, look, here's Miami doing it again. I do wonder though, because like at some point you have to pay the top. I don't know that their top is going to be good enough. And that's the biggest issue right now. Is that a champion? Like they're good enough to get to a championship. Are they good enough to win it as constructed? I don't know right this second. I know Jimmy Butler is a good enough one, but that's about it.
Yeah, to that point, it is just hard to see where those next moves come because there is so much that is already tied up on this roster. Now, that's not to say that we haven't seen them wheel and deal before and figure out a way to get someone that they want to get. Kyle Lowry being among those over the last couple of seasons, but there's a lot to figure out there with this roster going forward. Butler obviously proved once again what he can do in this postseason. I liked Bam a lot as well. And the way that he played in the finals, I thought he was a lot more aggressive when they were giving him space, which is something that we haven't really seen a ton from him before. He's been a little bit more hesitant to kind of attack off the dribble when they're sagging off of him further down towards the paint. We saw him several times, even during last night's game as well, driving right in, taking that little in and out dribble and trying to find his way to the bucket strong. And that is a great development for that team. Outside of that, though, where are the assets coming? That's kind of the big question going forward with Miami. Is just I don't know who slots in as that number 3 guy, let's say, behind Butler and Bam at this point, because you're not necessarily relying on huge contributions from Lowry, as it was proved in the finals. Like he's good when he comes off the bench and he's providing those quick spurts, but he's not going to be a 35, 38 minute a night guy.
Yeah, and their war chest is just not like, here's the thing. It's Miami. They're going to be in the discussion with every free agent ever. They're one of like 3 franchises that genuinely just have that blank check. They will always at least get a conversation. I don't know who they can trade for. Like, that's the thing is like guys become available. Obviously there's always going to be Dame discussions. Some massive NBA free agent will become available. Like, we just know how this works at this point. I don't know who you can trade for. The one that, well, you know what might make sense, but you can't reunite him, and it kind of stinks. No, it's Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's going to become available, and they could totally trade for him. Like, they have the ability to go and get him, and you can pair him with Jimmy, it'd be really good. But like, would it? We already saw that went once. So
I mean, based on everything that we've heard about that, based on everything we've heard about that situation coming out of Minnesota, with everything that Jeff Teague talked about just like a month or so ago on it, when he was talking about that infamous day at practice, I'm not sure that those two can ever be on the same team ever again. Not even in pickup.
I don't think they can be in the same buffet line ever again, let alone on the same team.
Not be anywhere near each other. So as fun as that like fake NBA trade is, there's no way.
No,
just no way.
The intriguing one is Kyrie, because Kyrie's an actual free agent, and so he would probably grant them a meeting. And so at that point, obviously, you can get better just by addition. That would kind of be dynamic, but that's the only thing out there right now that I can see. I mean, everyone on earth is going to link Jimmy and Embiid, but I don't even, if the Sixers are going to move Embiid, Miami just needs to have remotely the best package. Like, and I don't care. Like, listen. Call me if you're okay. Oh, call me if you're OKC. I ain't moving Embiid to Miami for nothing. But no, it's again, it's the NBA. Guys will become available. I just think right now, like Kyrie or Dame are the most intriguing, I guess, because like Dame I don't know what Dame is, if he's perpetually available or just like fully committed to Portland forever. It feels like maybe we're on the in between, but it sure doesn't seem like the organization is bullish to trade him. So if they're not going to move him, I certainly don't see that happening. Either way, draft night is approaching, so we'll soon get a lot of smoke coming out here sooner.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get we're 10 days out as we record this from the draft, a little bit less. There's definitely going to be plenty of smoke here over the next week and change.
It really doesn't slow down
into that night. No, it doesn't.
Does it feel like the draft was always relatively quick after the finals ended, but like, man, the first few weeks of summer, there used to be a fair gap. It felt like where now. It's the first. I mean, the whole month of June, it feels like, and then really through the first weeks of July. I mean, I guess they're getting into summer league then. Before it finally slows down. But I mean, we're not even, again, Denver just hoisted the trophy last night as we're recording this, and it already feels like we're getting ready. I mean, and not to mention the looming Ja Morant thing. It feels like we're all waiting for that to come out too. I haven't even really wanted to talk about that as much because like we just don't know anything. So I'm gonna kind of let it go there. But that
the time frame has been really compressed. For understandable reasons, though, at the same time, right? Because we're still trying to get in 82 games. We're also trying to not have like back-to-backs as much as previous years. And that's going to expand the schedule. And that's how we end up in the spot where, it's 10 days, little less before the draft that we're ending the NBA finals and then going straight into free agency thereafter. And almost then immediately right in the summer league. It's becoming that type of situation where it's almost a year-round entity in that respect, in the same way that, when you talk about the NFL, you get into that same sort of rhythm, right? Where there's a little bit of a break, but not too much in between. And with the NBA, there's actually even shorter of a break between actual activities than you get on the other side of things. So it's going to be fascinating, and it's all going to start up here relatively quickly.
I do think the NBA is number one free agency. Like, I don't think there's anything like it. Deadline day is close as well, but I mean, NBA free agency is so unexpected. Like, there can just be so many things that happen like I always flash back to when Kawhi went to the Clippers and they traded for Paul George. And I just remember waking up and I was like, I didn't even know Paul George was available. Like, what do you mean he's available from OKC? And the next thing you know, he's on the Clippers. Like the sheer shock of it can just happen. I feel like more with other sports.
And and this is the type of year that it happens too, right? Because if you're looking at who are the free agents that are available this year, like not talking about in trades, just the straight free agents list, it's not overly exciting, right? Like there's some guys that are on there. We'll talk about Van Vliet in a little bit, but outside of that, there's not a ton where you're just like, yes, need to know where this guy is going to end up. But those are the years where we end up having something wild happening, and it always seems to be that way. Even going into last summer, there wasn't a ton of intrigue until all of a sudden Kevin Durant's like, "Hey, get me out of Brooklyn." Now it took longer than we thought it was going to, but he ended up out of Brooklyn. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating here.
Something is always going to happen. Like there's just no way around it. I mean, I'm just realizing just because of all the way the schedule is broken. I mean, we haven't even talked about Chris Paul at all. Like Chris Paul, again, Kyrie's probably the biggest name on the market out there, but like Chris Paul getting bought out from Phoenix, maybe earlier. I mean, Ayton's, if he's going to move, is going to get traded. So obviously there's a lot less work with Chris Paul. The reality is that CP3 has just declined too much for what they were paying him, unfortunately. I mean, it's 2 straight playoff runs of just bad tastes in your mouth at the end of it. Like, I still think like Chris Paul he'll get picked up. Like there's no I'm not saying he's unplayable or anything like that. Of course you would imagine he goes to ring chase somewhere. I would be interested to see where that is. I mean, I'm not even like, maybe he goes to Denver, maybe he goes to Boston, maybe he goes to, maybe Miami does take a swing at him, puts him with Jimmy and sees what can happen there. I mean, that'll be a name to keep an eye on for sure. I do want to go up though to Canada real quick and go to the Raptors. We're going to talk about Van Vliet in a second, but the Raptors do have a new head coach, Darko Rakovic.
There you go. Attaboy. He was practicing
feel
that
good.
before,
Feel good.
folks.
A little bit. It's at least there. It's it's like an 8 out of 10. I feel good about it.
Good.
But no, former assistant, of course, with the Memphis Grizzlies, previously towards taking this job. Now the 10th coach in Raptors franchise history. A bit of an unexpected hire, of course. This is something that you and I talked before the show started. That this was obviously a name that came out of nowhere. But in a way, I kind of like those hires a lot of the time. Like, and he's had a tenure in Phoenix recently too. So obviously, 2 good assistant gigs recently. He's coached in the G League before. So, the Raptors are in a weird spot. So I kind of like them taking a weird swing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think, one of the things that you're hearing coming out about the hire is that the front office honestly was even surprised themselves with how well that he did in the interview process. And that's what ended up making them decide to pull the trigger on this decision. He's from everything that has come out, his player development abilities seem to be at the forefront of the list of positives and reasons why you would bring him in. And the Raptors obviously have young guys there that can continue to develop here over the next couple of seasons as they look to try and get back into that spot where they can get back into that championship contention. So yeah, it's an interesting hire. It seems to be one that's playing more towards a little bit of that long game that we were talking about with Mike Malone and the Nuggets too, right? Is trying to keep that coach around for a while, develop with the same group of guys over the course of those years and see what happens. So it's an interesting swing from from Toronto, but outside of that, it's hard to read too much into it because we're just learning about this guy and we haven't necessarily seen tendencies from him in the past, at least here in the States, obviously being a previous head coach in Spain and Serbia prior to coming over here. But yeah, it's an interesting move to say the least.
Yes. Second Serbian head coach or Serbian-born head coach ever in the NBA. A big week for Serbia between him and Jokic. I mean, their NBA stock is.
You saw Masai Ujiri made a joke about that during the course of the press conference.
I didn't actually, so that's good. It's booming this week.
he said he wants to be known as Masai Ujirianovic
Okay.
from now on. So there you go. He's definitely playing into the big week for Serbia overall.
No, I agree though. It's definitely got an eye on the long term. I guess my questions just come down to what do they do with the roster, and that's where we're at
Yeah,
now. Because I mean, last year, you go out and you have a great season 2 years ago. You pretty much, I would say, you overachieve. You get the 5 seed, you lose in the first round, but you're a really much more competitive team post Kawhi and post Kyle Lowry than I think people expect you to be. But then you go out and you pretty much disappoint this year, like losing in the play-in game, just not really, they just a supreme disappointment everywhere when given the expectations from the year before. And you do, like, Van Vliet's declined his option. You've Gary Trent Jr.'s got an option decision. It seems likely he's going to decline that, so he could very well be on the move. Pascal Siakam's been in every rumor. It feels like, obviously, he's a guy that would bring back a tremendous return. I mean, in my opinion, by far the most talented player on the roster.
yeah,
Um, OG Anunoby was a guy who obviously all last offseason was rumored. They didn't end up making that move, but he's still available. It doesn't feel like they're going to trade Scotty Barnes. That would go against kind of the youth movement thing there. But yeah, I mean, when they go out and trade for Jakob Poeltl last year, like, that's a type of win now move. And it feels like that's what Toronto was trying to do. Now it feels like they're trying to
yeah.
pivot a little bit. I just, like, how much do you expect them to blow this up in total?
Yeah, it does seem like the tea leaves are trending that way a little bit, just based on obviously this hire and how things have shaken out here. I mean, I don't know how much to read into a guy declining his player option, like with Van Vliet. That's more of just a money play on the part of the player that I completely understand and respect in all aspects, right? Like, he's clearly played his way into a situation where he's going out there and he's what, the number 2 point guard on the market here outside of Kyrie this summer. He's going to
Yeah.
get plenty of offers for a lot more money than he was going to make on that player option. So I don't know how much to make of that. But yeah, to your point, okay, do you then try and lock up Van Vliet on that type of max contract that he may command on the open market and run it back with the roster that you had this past season that disappointed in that play-in round? Or if you don't and Van Vliet's gone, then yeah, you do start looking around the roster a little bit like, okay, what are the pieces that we have in order to try and get the most return? Now, I mean, who's going to trade with Masai Ujiri at this point? I don't know. I feel like he often finds a way to get the better of deals that he's a part of. So it's going to be interesting to see like how that whole situation plays out. But yeah, I don't know how much to expect them to blow it up. It's going to depend on what they can get in return. And at the end of the day, Siakam would command a lot. Anunoby, with the right team, going to command a decent return there as well. So they're a team that is going to be interesting to watch the approach to this offseason, and then depending on that approach is going to turn it into a, like we said earlier, crazier offseason than we may have expected, because there may be bigger pieces on the move than we previously thought there would be.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, like, Siakam moving, that'd be a huge domino to fall if he ends up
Yeah.
moving. And certainly would springboard any rebuild that they were doing. Like, that would be a full big flag up in terms of intentionality, because it would then, with Fred leaving, Gary Trent Jr. would likely be gone then too. That would sure seem like you're pivoting towards a rebuild. I would imagine OG gets traded then too. But regardless, now with Van Vliet, with him being on the market, this was not unexpected. Toronto's kind of talked about that. I mean, he's Fred VanVleet is the ultimate bet on himself guy, right? Like, of course,
Oh
he's going
yeah.
to make that bet again. He bet on himself once into a max contract after going undrafted. Like, he's going to for sure get paid. I mean, the landing spots, the Lakers, if they need a guard, we know they've been going after Kyrie. That would make a lot of sense. Phoenix with waiving Chris Paul, Van Vliet could be in the mix there. I think that would make a lot of sense. Everybody keeps bringing up the Sixers. That just depends on what happens with Harden, I guess. Like, we still don't have
Yep.
any resolution there. Um, I don't know how well a Van Vliet, Tyrese Maxey backcourt works. Like, I think offensively it does, but like defensively, that sounds like a disaster.
Yeah.
But it's also, again, if Harden leaves, you may not have a choice, unfortunately. And so you kind of work your way around it. To that extent, I mean, Houston could very well be in the mix as well. I mean, there are teams like Houston and Orlando, and I mean, some of the kind of lower teams that could obviously offer him a lot of money. So, I mean, I hear like Fred VanVleet's a champion. That's the thing is like normally I'd be like, oh, maybe he'll go ring chase.
Maybe
but, like,
he'll
he's
go
got his. Like, yeah, he's good on that. So
he's already got one part of the equation that we usually look at when we're talking about free agents, and it's the ring, right? He's already got that. So now the other part of the equation is, okay, where can he get the most money, or where can the experience be the best with that max contract? And we'll see it. We'll see how that plays out. It could be somebody like a Houston or an Orlando, or I mean, you mentioned the Lakers. I know from a Lakers perspective, that would be probably their best case scenario going into this offseason, given the way that the season ended for them.
Yeah, I talked myself out of Orlando literally right after I said it because I was like, wait, man, they got enough guards already. Like it money wise, it works. Like they for sure.
Yeah.
And if they want to and they want to just go out and pay a guard, it definitely makes a lot of sense. But I mean, they already have a lot on the roster between Fultz and Cole Anthony. You still want to give, I mean, Jalen Suggs is kind of an in between, but you still want to give him a lot of minutes too.
Yep.
That just, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. But either way, like we said, the dominoes will be starting to fall here a lot sooner than later with the draft coming up. In the meantime, though, want to thank my friend Ryan Mayer for coming on the podcast, and want to thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Driving Dish NBA podcast. We appreciate you guys as always. Follow Ryan on Twitter at R_Mayer, MAYER. Of course, you've heard him here on the podcast before. No doubt that he will be on later at some point in the future. In the meantime, leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them on the podcast. Anywhere else you can find a podcast, you can find us. Watch the show on YouTube. Like I said, I kind of teased it at the beginning of the show. We might get a Justin appearance next week. I don't know. Like, again, this is not pressure from me. Justin, I know how you get if you listen to this. I am not pressuring you at all. I hope Quinn is doing well. But yeah, we will see. Either way, though, I've got a draft guest lined up for next week, so you will for sure be at the minimum getting that. So stay tuned. Thank you again to Ryan, and we'll catch you guys next week.